Well, thank you all for that warm welcome, and I can't think of a person that I'd more like to be honored in name of than Rachel Carson. What an amazing human being she was. Louder? Okay. Thank you. I can't, there we go. How about that? That's probably better. I want to start by saying congratulations to my fellow awardees, Katherine Johnson, whose family is here, and her daughter Joylette will be accepting, and Debbie Sterling for your work in business, whether it's mathematics and helping us chart our program into space many years ago, or it is contributions in business. Women at every level are making wonderful contributions, and I want to thank the committee here for honoring me, but also for the work that you're doing in so many ways to elevate the importance of women in everything that's happened really across this planet since we were first here many, many years ago. I also want to applaud the dedication and passion of Joan Wages and for Gretchen and Susan and their leadership on the board. The National Women's History Museum should be here. You know, this is my new home. Washington, D.C. has been my home for the last 18 months. Seattle is my real home. But I've done a lot of walking around the city with my husband and with visitors that have come and stayed with me. And it is an amazing city, and it stands for a great deal. But I walk around counting statues and how many statues I can find that aren't of white men on horseback. Actually, as you go around the city, there are some sitting down, and there are most on horseback and a few standing up. But there are very, very few statues or elements of recognition in any degree to people of color or to women. And yet we know the rich history and culture of this country. We all stand on the shoulders of our sisters and our brothers, some who toiled away without having any recognition, and some might have had recognition, but nowhere near the amount of the unknown people. Sometimes it's even hard with these statues to figure out who they're honoring. You know, so that's another thing I try to do, is figure out who they're honoring and you don't even know. So the National Women's History Museum should be here. It should be prominently here, and it should tell the stories of the journeys of so many women that have really supported the people who are in those statues around our city, but so often are not recognized. I will say that we are doing a better job, I think, than ever before. President Obama is committed to telling the stories of all Americans. My predecessor, Ken Salazar, worked hard on the Latino Heritage Study Group for the National Park Service and women's heritage in the National Park Service. We are also extending that to the LGBT community and other communities represented in our stories. And there are so many parts of women's history that are tied to sites and locations that we really have to preserve and protect and understand. And so some great work has been done on designations like the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Monument and a number of other National Historic Landmark designations. So I encourage all of you to think about those places that will help tell the story of our history and culture, so it can go beyond the museum here in the nation's capital to telling the story of women throughout this great country. So I am honored tonight to receive this award in the name of Rachel Carson. She is probably, as you learned from the video, the most significant person in the awakening of our nation to our impact, our collective impact on the environment. I gave a speech in 2010, which was really about the awakening of business to the future of our planet. And I recall back in 1962, Life magazine, those of us that are old enough remember Life magazine, those giant full-page, beautiful pictures. And in 1962, there was an advertisement from Humble Oil, which was a precursor to ExxonMobil. And I know ExxonMobil is a sponsor, and thank you for doing that tonight, and also my former employer. But I will say that the picture of Life magazine, two-page spread, and it is the front of a glacier. And I'm not kidding you. Here was the caption, because I have it. Each day, Humble supplies enough energy to melt 7 million tons of glacier. This giant glacier has remained unmelted for centuries. Yet the petroleum industry, the petroleum energy Humble supplies, if converted into heat, could melt it at the rate of 80 tons each second. I'm not kidding. So I'm sure ExxonMobil's groaning as much as I was when I read that, since I went to work for them long after this. But that was the same year, 1962, that Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, and she wrote, boy, was she pressing. We stand now where two roads diverge. But unlike the roads in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we have long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress with great speed, but at its end lies disaster. The other fork in the road, the one less traveled by, offers our only chance to reach a destination that ensures the preservation of the earth. Well, I know which road you've been traveling since Rachel Carson's book in 1962. And maybe we've made some inroads on that road less traveled by. But now in my current job, as I travel around the country and in fact around the world, I will say climate change is happening everywhere, across our landscapes. And it's clear that the choices that we have all made and continue to make are catching up with us. And we must lead if we are to have a bright future for our children and our grandchildren. So I'm honored now to enjoy an office that is just above where Rachel Carson worked at the Department of the Interior and the precursor to the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's symbolic of how I and so many others stand on the shoulders of Rachel Carson. So I was 6 years old when Silent Spring was written. Contrary to the video, I was born in 1956. So I still have like a year and a few months before that 60th birthday. So I was 6 when the book was born. And it was a time when Rachel Carson really understood the importance of engaging youth, and I would consider myself a beneficiary of her great work my whole life. She said, if a child is to keep alive his inborn sense of wonder, he needs the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with him the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. So I just want to give a tribute to those who nurtured my curiosity, and a call to action to each of us who have an opportunity to do that in the young people in our lives. Certainly my parents, who did much to nurture my curiosity, but Mrs. Beckman, Mrs. Augie, Mrs. Gellert, and Mrs. Black. How many of you can name a handful of teachers in your background? Probably a lot of you. So thank you. I just want to talk for a minute about Mrs. Black. Mrs. Black was brave. Mrs. Black took a dozen children into the woods for 2 weeks at a time. And she invited a grad student, different one for each week because the grad students could only stand us for a week. And I hiked across the Olympic Peninsula with these children and a handful of grad students. I spent 2 weeks on an island in the San Juans that was in the Inside Passage in Washington State that was uninhabited. We mapped the island and we did marine biology. And we tried to candy kelp, and I can't say that I recommend that, but she let us try. We learned about meteorology and entomology and marine biology and many practical lessons of surviving in harmony with nature. So it was a delight when Mrs. Black, now in her 80s, and her daughter came to visit me just a few weeks ago. She gave me the opportunity to say what I have said to her multiple times about what a difference she made through her work. And I was 9. So, if I could give this award to Mrs. Black, I would. And the many women like her in my childhood that nurtured that curiosity that continues to this day. So I want to end with another Rachel Carson quote. She said, if I had influence with the good fairy who is supposed to preside over the christening of all children, I should ask that her gift to each child in the world be a sense of wonder so indestructible that it would last throughout life. So, it's a call to action to all of you, as caring adults, as mothers, as fathers. A few of you, if you're lucky enough like I am, as a week ago, to be a grandmother. Yeah. I want all of you to be that good fairy that nurtures in children a sense of wonder, that they will care for our planet as Rachel Carson would have hoped. And they will become the women that support this museum. They will become the boys and girls that grow up to be the men and women that are in this room that make a difference in many ways throughout society. So thank you for this wonderful award.